Good morning, dear colleagues. Once again, a warm welcome from my side and on behalf of the Federal Council of the Austrian Parliament. The first session of our meeting will be dedicated to the priorities of the Austrian presidency of the Council of the European Union. I would like to kindly invite Ms. Caroline Edstadler, State Secretary at the Federal Ministry of the Interior, to introduce the priorities of the Austrian presidency. Those of you who attended our dinner last evening already had the opportunity to listen to her speech on the global responsibility of the European Union. I just would like to mention, before Mrs. Edstadler starts her intervention, that in the meantime you can submit your requests for the floor. Mrs. State Secretary, you have the floor.
Sehr geehrter Herr Nationalratspräsident, sehr geehrte Frau Bundesratspräsidentin,
Madam President, Mr. Speaker, Chairperson of the European Affairs Committee of the Austrian National Council and Federal Council, speakers coming from EU member countries, dear representatives of the European Parliament. First of all, I would like to thank you very much for having invited me to this COSAC meeting. This allows me to speak on behalf of the Austrian federal government and to spell out the priorities of our presidency, as well as talk about the discussions that were started last night. Now, Austria, on the 1st of July 2018, took over the presidency of the European Council for the third time after acceding to the European Union. In 1998 and 2006, we already assumed the presidency. Ever since our last presidency, dating back to 2006, the parliamentary dimension has changed dramatically with a view to the Treaty of Lisbon. This dimension has been strengthened. We are therefore looking forward to a constructive dialogue and in-depth partnership. And I think that the European ideas can only benefit from this. Now, Austria's Council presidency takes place in a time of great challenges. This is due to a number of factors. We know that there is now quite intense international competition, and we also live in times of warfare, and we still experience the consequences of warfare in our neighborhood. Global migration flows, climate change, and the threats posed by terrorism and radicalization, those are other factors. All of these crises, of course, have shattered the confidence of European citizens in the European Union. It's our duty to re-establish trust in the EU and its institutions. For this, it is necessary to take common action and to pursue policies that are necessary for the EU to meet challenges head-on. That is why our motto is a Europe that protects. That's the motto of the Austrian EU Council presidency. We want to strengthen the EU, and we want Europe to be closer to its citizens in order to re-establish trust. This is quite important. In May 2019, EP elections will take place. Now, in order to overcome these challenges, it will be very important to place our trust in national parliaments as well as the European Parliament, because these are the institutions that act as mouthpieces for European citizens. And we also, of course, very much rely on the principle of subsidiarity. What's important is to focus on the key questions and to devise joint solutions. Focusing on small issues is also important, but those smaller issues need to be dealt with at regional level. Now, diversity in unity. This is an important motto which is also in line with current discussions. National parliaments, of course, play a crucial role when it comes to preparing EU legal acts. I would like to thank the Speaker, the President of the Federal Council, and the chairpersons of the European Affairs Committees of the National Council and the Federal Council. I would like to thank all those persons very much for their work. Now, what's also very important, of course, is to talk about the task force set up by President Juncker. Frans Timmermans heads this task force devoted to subsidiarity and proportionality, and I think that this task force is a very important component. I'm very much looking forward to Frans Timmermans' report, which may well be handed over to Jean-Claude Juncker tomorrow. In November, the Austrian Council presidency will organize a conference devoted to the issue of subsidiarity in Austria's westernmost province, Vorarlberg, on the 15th and 16th of November in Bregenz. Now, I already talked about active citizens' involvement. We are convinced of the fact that the European Union can only develop further if people living in the European Union, our citizens, well, if they are in a position to have a say and to promote these developments, the European Union, therefore, needs to take into account the problems, concerns, hopes, and challenges of citizens and take them seriously. We're going to take an active part in citizens' consultations that will take place in almost all member countries. We're going to take an active approach to this. The reform of the European Citizens' Initiative is a very important process, and we also want to finalize EP negotiations under the Austrian chairmanship. The European Citizens' Initiative is quite an efficient tool when it comes to addressing concerns. It's a way for European citizens to have a say and to voice their concerns. Let me now turn to the priorities spelled out by the Austrian presidency. It's actually three priorities that I'd like to place an emphasis on. First of all, security and the fight against illegal migration. Secondly, we like to maintain prosperity and competitiveness through digitization. And the third priority is stability in our neighborhood, bringing the Western Balkans and Southeastern Europe closer to the European Union. Let me now refer to security and illegal migration. Now, this is going to be one of the priorities discussed during the meeting of heads of state and government in Salzburg on the 20th of September. What will they focus on? They will focus on strengthening external borders, strengthening European Agency for Border and Coast Guards, Frontex. Now, this, of course, is a key requirement for reforms to take place in other areas, such as a common and resilient European asylum system. Discussions that have taken place over the past 2 years have, of course, delivered, but key questions such as the reform of the Dublin system have not been resolved yet. Now, the European Council at the end of June was an important step in the right direction, and we will have to build on the progress made, but of course we need to clarify a number of issues. I hope that you will support us proactively in this undertaking. It's very important to find solutions for people, for our European citizens. Let me now turn to the second priority, which is prosperity and competitiveness. Now, the European Union still is a leading trade power. It's actually the largest single market in the world. But the share in global economic output has dwindled, and we need to take countermeasures. It's about finalizing the digital single market. It's about avoiding excessive regulation. It's about creating a modern and balanced framework. And it's about modernizing public administration systems. What's important for the Austrian presidency is to safeguard fair, competitive rules and to continue work with regards to taxes in the digital economy. Let me now turn to the third priority, stability in our neighborhood. Now, security and peace in Europe, that's only possible if there is stability and security in our neighborhood. Commissioner Hahn has already alluded to this on numerous occasions. He said that stability needs to be exported rather than importing instability. What we need, therefore, is reliable partners. The countries of the Western Balkans have been reliable partners during the migration crisis. Now, it's important for us to offer them an EU perspective. In other words, important incentives for reforms and progress. Now, the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia and Greece have found a solution to the name issue, and this, of course, is an important step in the right direction. The Western Balkans region, well, in terms of economic and security policy, this region is part of Europe. Full-fledged European Union is only possible if states are able to accede to the Union that have fulfilled the criteria. If the Western Balkan countries become part of the European Union, this will bring about greater unity in Europe. This is the only way that this can happen. But of course, major challenges need to be faced up to by Austria during its presidency. Let me just single out two: negotiations with regard to the multi-annual financial framework and negotiations with regard to the Brexit, to be finalized by fall 2018. Negotiations with a view to the multi-annual financial framework, well, they have just started, and we're going to make an active contribution to this. Now, the funds, of course, the funds used need to bring about greater efficiency and a clear-cut European value added. The EU is designed to benefit from this and is designed to meet current challenges. This new orientation, a new orientation of important sectoral policies, this is another issue during our negotiations, such as policy of cohesion. We are going to make active contributions to quick and efficient progress. Let me now turn to the Brexit. Now, these negotiations need to be finalized in a timely fashion. The parliaments, the European Parliament and the British Parliament need enough time to ratify these agreements. This is an important concern of ours, because we want the Brexit to occur in an orderly fashion. What's important, of course, is for political unity to also be negotiated on and to prevail. We want the United Kingdom to continue to be a close partner of the European Union. Now, at the beginning of my presentation, I alluded to the role played by the parliamentary dimension and to the fact that it's been strengthened, which is very good. We're very much looking forward to an in-depth exchange with the Austrian National Council and the Federal Council, as well as the European Parliament. A number of important conferences will take place devoted to this issue. Let me just single out a conference that will take place in mid-September in Vienna, an interparliamentary conference on stability, economic coordination, and control at EU level, and many other conferences. Now, by way of conclusion, let me just point out the following. Because of close cooperation, important contributions are made. Important progress, or considerable progress, has been possible because of this. And this is quite important with a view to the European elections that will take place in May 2019. Now, we can only convince European citizens if we manage to place an emphasis on the value added of the European Union. And we can only convince our European citizens of the necessity if we place an emphasis on this. We need to deliver specific results. Thank you very much for having listened to me. I've talked about the priorities of the Austrian presidency, and I'm very much looking forward to our discussion and to our cooperation over the next 6 months. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, State Secretary, for the overview of the Austrian presidency. Colleagues, now let's move on to the panel discussion. We have a lot of colleagues who will address this panel, and please hold your individual remarks within 3 minutes. The time will be displayed on the screen. Thanks a lot to President Sobotka for attending our meeting. Goodbye. So the first on our list is Thierry Leiden. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I'd like to thank the Austrian Presidency for the wonderful reception last night, and to thank you for hosting that event. And congratulations on your third presidency of the European Union. This is a very crucial time in the history of the Union, and I appreciate the address by your guest speaker there. And to say that the overnight news, of course, of the resignation of David Davis is quite a blow to the negotiations. As we thought, there was some progress made last Friday in Chequers, but we will be discussing that later on in the day in relation to the future of the European Union. But certainly this is of great concern, particularly as Ireland is the most affected of the 27 countries left of the European Union when the United Kingdom leave. So we have a particular interest in this area, and I know that we have the support of our colleagues right throughout the whole Union, and particularly Mr. Barnier is very aware of our situation, and I know that most of the delegates here are aware of the connection between the Irish border and in relation to the future of the European Union, and the position that we are an island of mainland Europe. So we'll be discussing that later on in the day, but I want to wish the Presidency success in the policies which are put forward, a Europe that protects. And I hope that Europe will be protecting the interests of the Irish Republic when it comes to negotiation in relation to Brexit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next is from France, Jean Bizet.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, the Austrian EU presidency is facing a number of challenges, of course, and we wish the Austrian presidency a lot of success. There are a number of challenges to be faced up to, of course, such as managing the migration crisis, which, of course, is one of your priorities. A Europe that protects, that is your overarching motto. Now, this crisis shows that the European Union has been quite powerless, and this is what the public, of course, also feels, and this is a major threat as far as Europe is concerned. Now, we take note that a number of progress has been made, such as strengthening Frontex, but the reform of the European asylum system has become bogged down. There seems to be a discrepancy between the European processes and the urgent action to be taken. The last European Council, the most recent Council, singled out a number of approaches to be taken. Now, your presidency, how will your presidency ensure that all of this can be implemented and put into practice? You also talked about competitiveness and digitization. That, of course, is another priority that we support. Europe can only succeed if it offers digitization as well as productivity. We need industrial policy that also includes new approaches with regards to competition policy. This policy has not developed over the past few decades, whereas the world, of course, has changed quite dramatically. We also support your willingness to support regional partnership and neighborhood policy. You talked about the Western Balkans in your presentation. Now, emphasis should be placed on significant progress to be made. Here I talk about institutional setup, I talk about the rule of law system, and I also talk about economic policies. We need to take into account that the public is quite reluctant to the enlargement process. And we need to, of course, manage the enlargement process in an orderly fashion. You also talked about the multi-annual financial framework in your statement. Now, cohesion policy and agricultural policy, of course, all of this needs to be adjusted properly. What about the schedule? What is your approach taken to negotiations? These negotiations, of course, will be quite tough. Now, during your presidency, the Brexit issue will also be negotiated. That's another important challenge. We very much support Michel Barnier's position. And then the Irish question, well, that still is an open issue. It's quite a delicate issue, of course. But, of course, this will also have quite an impact on the Brexit. The Brexit decision, of course, is a decision that has disastrous consequences. It very much hurts the British people, of course. And during your presidency, how are you going to take up this significant challenge? And for this, I would like to thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur, pour votre intervention. Next is
Thank you for this statement.
Hungary.
Thank you, the floor, Mr. Chairman. Dear Madam State Secretary, dear distinguished colleagues, I'm delighted to be back to Vienna again. During the last presidency, 2005, as I remember, I've been there in this meeting. That time, Europe had to cope with the negative outcome of the French and the Dutch referendums on the constitutional treaty. This time, the unity of the European Union is tested again from more aspects, more precisely in view to result of the Brexit referendum or in questions related to security and migration. Mr. Chairman, as far as migration is concerned, the June European Council ended up with a real paradigm shift. The time of obligatory relocation mechanism, which is not workable in practice and cannot control secondary migration, should be over. The top priority should be the effective control of the external borders as well as increase external actions. That's why I would like to thank for the Austrian presidency, its program. This original position of the Visegrad countries is now shared by many of us, and I'm happy that now we can work for the security of the European people and the respect of the European culture. External border protection goes hand in hand with the internal free movement of persons. I urge the Austrian presidency to work for the restoration of the Schengen area and the abolition of internal controls. I express my full support as well for the priorities on the Euro-Atlantic integration of the Western Balkan countries. The European perspective offers peace, not just in our region, but would make our European unity much stronger and larger. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker will be Jaroslav Obremski from Poland.
Thank you very much. Fully accept for Austrian priorities from Polish side. First, stabilization in West Balkan. Our support is not only because this year we have the centennial anniversary of the end of the Great War, but also from economic, strategic, political, and migration reasons. Serbia, Montenegro, Albania should be a full member of EU as quickly as possible. The second, we similarly think about digital economy. We are against exaggerated regulation, and we want taxation in place where the profit is created. We often complain of EU, but only together we could be effective to USA and, for example, to this company as Google. The fifth, your first priority, a Europe that protects. Crucial. Now, inside EU, we have not only deficit of democracy in Brussels. Good example is the problem of yellow card, the practice of yellow card, but also deficit of feeling of security. In our opinion, more feeling of security than real lack of security. But this problem have a big influence also for the results of election. Now, the answer of EU is closer to the concept of Viktor Orban from before 3 years. Poland remarks is that when we discuss about migration, necessary is great fiscal support to Africa, and my country want to take part in it. Europe that protects means also good solution for example, Ireland and Spanish after the Brexit. A Europe that protects means also common united policy to Russia and good neighborhoods with Ukraine, difficult relation with Belarus and Moldavia. The relation between national parliaments with Brussels, I want to comment only by one quote, former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Sweden, Carl Bildt. The answer for Europe is more Bratislava, less Brussels. I think the key of solving of our problem is for better understanding this sentence. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker will be from Portugal, Margarita Marques. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I'd like to endorse the first speaker and thank the presidency for our meeting last night. At the same time, I should like to congratulate you and wish you a productive 6 months for the Austrian presidency. Austria is doing this for the third time, and it's very productive in making concrete proposals. That is the major thing during those 6 months. This is going to be favorable for Austria and good for the European Union as a whole. As regards the priorities, I would like to refer to security and the fight against illegal immigration. I'm using the term illegal immigration on purpose, and nevertheless, I'd like to focus on security. Security, the term security is being used in the sense of protection of the external borders of the European Union, strengthening of external border protection. But there is another dimension to security, a dimension which should also be highlighted. I'm referring to security that is related to the protection of rights, protection of access to social rights in particular. This is an aspect of security which has to be highlighted as well. You said that citizens demand security and prosperity, but security in every sense of the term, not just security in the sense of external border protection. And I'm sure we'll come back to this under the next item of the agenda and also within the framework of the multi-annual financial framework. The migration fund, which has been proposed within the framework of the financial framework, is a fund that is linked again to the question of borders and border protection, but the social and economic issues of migrants are being underestimated and ignored concerning migrants that are already in Europe. I think this is an issue that will have to be highlighted within the framework of cohesion policy. I'd like to draw your attention to the report of the United Nations on the population in the year 2050, and I think this is a cause for concern. Demographics is an important issue for the future of the European Union that should not be underestimated.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
Karin Keller-Sutter from Switzerland.
Mr. Chairman, Madam State Secretary, colleagues, first of all, speaking on behalf of the Swiss delegation, I'd like to express my thanks to today's COSAC meeting. It should not be taken for granted that neighboring countries that are not members of the European Union are allowed to participate. It's a great tradition. We've seen with pleasure and satisfaction that the program of the Austrian presidency also provides for negotiations between the European Union and Switzerland on the so-called institutional agreement to be concluded this year. This is very much in the interest of Switzerland because Switzerland wants legal certainty. The European Union and Switzerland are important economic partners, but not just economic partners, also partners in other issues such as education, research, and culture. And we note with satisfaction that negotiations between Switzerland and the European Union have made great progress, but if they are to be finalized in the course of this year, it will be necessary for us to arrive at consensus regarding the protection of wages and salaries in Switzerland. Switzerland has a special wage protection regime. We have the so-called flanking measures that were adopted when the Swiss population said yes to that. The Swiss population was the only one to say yes on the freedom of movement of person, but at the same time it decided on the protection of its wages, because Switzerland has the highest wages in Europe, and many people come to work in Switzerland for a short period of time. Austria is well known as a bridge builder, and we're confident that under the Austrian presidency it will be possible to arrive at a pragmatic solution on the matter of wage protection. Switzerland wants to have the right to decide sovereignly on wage protection, because that's the only way for us to find an internal alliance for this agreement that will or can obtain the majority vote of the Swiss population, because this will be put to a referendum in Switzerland. I thank you very much for your support.
From the Netherlands, Joris Bakker.
Thank you. First and foremost, thank you for the excellent start of your presidency and the warm welcome last night on Leopoldsberg. And we applaud the priorities of the Austrian presidency. Times are challenging. It's an ambition program, and we will support you where possible. I have one comment, which is on the text of the session 1 and security and fight against illegal migration. And it might seem a detail, but I believe it's not. I refer to the use of the word flows in migration, uncontrolled migratory flows. And it has become a habit. If I look at the statements of the European Council in June, recent statement, it's used 3 times. And I believe we should be mindful not to dehumanize the problem in wording. The subject, I mean, water flows, river flows, maybe currency flows, but migration is about people on the move. And I believe that if it becomes part of statements, it becomes part of language, I think it becomes part of the thinking about the problem itself. And I don't want to infer certain views on this, but I believe we should be careful. And I would deplore if that would be the language commonly used. It's not a natural disaster, it's man-made, and we have to solve it as mankind. I think reference to migration, tout court, just migration, should suffice. So concluding, language matters, words matter, and I recommend you as chairman to be mindful of that principle in future statements during your presidency. Thank you.
Thanks very much. We'll do so. Our next contribution is from Sergio Badelli from Italy.
Thank you, chairpersons. Thank you for your invitation. As everybody knows, Italy so far has been playing an irreplaceable role in managing migration from the south. The central Mediterranean route, the most sizable and most tragic route. We have greeted with hope and optimism the conclusions of the European Council, stating that the European Union will stand by the side of Italy as far as the Central Mediterranean route is concerned. This was not the case so far. Some countries have not provided the desirable support, and we're very pleased that the Austrian presidency has chosen as a priority the question of migration. We must do more and better in a collective manner. We must act collectively. We've been asking for a long time for the Union to change its approach to migration policies. We must move to a system of shared responsibility, of a fair division of labor. We need a European management. We've got to change approach. We must move from the current management of emergencies to an approach which recognizes the structural nature of migration policies. We must go beyond Dublin and establish a system based on a fair distribution of responsibilities going beyond the criterion of the country of first entry. Some headway was made establishing the medium-term objective of a social and economic transformation of Africa through a close partnership. At the same time, we are very much concerned in view of some unilateral actions which have been undermining for years the Schengen system. We would like to strengthen agreements with third countries to prevent and manage migration flows. We need to establish centers of international protection in transit countries in coordination with the UNHCR and the IMO. At the same time, we need to strengthen the external borders through more effective initiatives to combat traffickers of human beings, also through agreements with North African and Middle Eastern countries. Let me recall in conclusion, the European Union should take on a shared responsibility for people rescued at sea. This responsibility should not fall only and solely on countries of first entry. We must go beyond the notion of illegal crossing for people rescued in international waters. This is in compliance with international national obligations following search and rescue operations. We cannot bring all these people to Italy or Spain. The Italian people has done very much, quite a lot. It cannot be left alone. The European Union was established to create a peaceful continent based on solidarity, but solidarity must involve each and every one of us. It must be based on a fair distribution of labor. We will be able only in this way to ensure reception and integration to improve the situation of everybody.
Thank you very much. Next is Adrian Vuksanovic from Montenegro.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here today. For us from Montenegro, COSAC meetings have proven to be very enriching. We are here to present our progress in the negotiations with the EU, but also to hear the newest developments in the Union. I would like to thank first the Bulgarian presidency for their contribution to the EU enlargement process, and now to the Austrian presidency for putting in the EU perspective of the Western Balkans in its presidency priorities. Austrian Chancellor Mr. Kurz stated in the European Parliament 6 days ago that we deserve the EU membership and that the Union will only be completed with the Western Balkans. We couldn't agree more. We share the same common historical heritage and cultural values with the EU, and we know that our future lies within the Union. That being said, we also agree that we should be assessed based on individual performance of each country and tangible results, without any package deals. Parliament and the government of Montenegro are fully committed to our EU goal, and we will continue working on the reforms, especially in the rule of law area. Currently, we have opened 3 chapters, of which 3 are closed. We are also ready to open negotiations in chapters 27, and we hope to get your support. In the rule of law, we are continually working on implementation of measures from our action plans. We have finished the legislative phase, and now we are focused on implementation. We would like to thank the EU national parliaments for their continued support to Montenegro. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Glenn Bedingfield from Malta, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm pleased that the migration or legal immigration is among the Austrian presidency's priorities, and as it is an ever complex and challenging situation. My government's recent position has been influenced by recent developments and that happened in the Mediterranean, and we are calling for innovative solutions, always keeping in mind that international law must be respected. The current Dublin regulation is not functional, as it results in a disproportionate burden on few member states, and it frankly portrays the European Union as a failure when it is faced with a crisis. Countries like Malta and Italy cannot face such crisis alone. No European country must feel abandoned by the rest of member states. Malta and its neighbours have been doing their part in migration. Our forces have worked tirelessly to save people, and we are thankful to those countries which have agreed to take migrants and share the burden. We don't need any more high-level declarations. What we need is, at this point, operational action. Hence, I urge the Austrian presidency to keep on pressure on governments and urge other governments to keep an open mind and to work constructively towards a multifaceted solution to the illegal immigration situation in the Mediterranean. We are a Europe of tolerance, a Europe of peace, a Europe of solidarity, and this principle must always be the guiding principle at this particular moment and in the future, so that we truly mean the true meaning of a Europe that protects. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Next is Elvira Kovac from Serbia.
Thank you, distinguished chair, dear colleagues. First of all, I would like to thank the chairperson for the invitation and to express hope that we will maintain the continuity in our good relations, mutual cooperation, and in providing support to Serbia on its path towards the EU membership. For the Western Balkans, the year of 2018 started by putting the region among the priorities of the Bulgarian presidency of the Council of the European Union, and it continues by having Austria that also included the European perspective for the Western Balkans in the priorities on its agenda, and we would like to thank for it. Having in mind that the enlargement policy was the basis for the development of the EU as we know it today, and one of the most successful union policies, we really believe that this is extremely important, not just for the Western Balkans and those countries, but for the European Union as a whole. Because otherwise, some different ideas that are in collision with our path toward the EU might strengthen, as we heard last night and even in this introductory speech today. Allow me to express my hope that during the Austrian presidency, opening of the negotiating chapters within the negotiations between the EU and the Republic of Serbia will be continued and, if I can say so, even more accelerated, because it is opening of the chapters that encourages faster reforms in the fields covered by these chapters. This is why I would like to ask to, and we really hope for, that during the Austrian presidency, more than one intergovernmental conference aimed at opening the negotiating chapters will be held. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. The next intervention is from Gabriela Crețu from Romania.
Thank you very much, Chair. So, to be coherent with my proposal, Social Democrats, S&D Group in the European Parliament, ruling party now, Romania, as incoming presidency, just joined the Troika yesterday. We have replaced Estonia, a significant presidency from our point of view, and we joined our Bulgarian friends. We'd like to congratulate once again for their hard work during the latest 6 months. Our expectations from Austrian acting presidency are bigger than usual. The result of our first presidency of the Council are not only dependent on Austrian priorities, direction, and speed. All our activity, actually, every future action would be related to your presidency approach to the future and your ambitions. We have only one issue to clarify now, benefiting by the presence of the minister here. A few days ago, the Chancellor Kurz appreciated that, I quote, "It is possible to reach an agreement on the multi-annual financial framework before European elections." On the other side, our Austrian parliamentarian colleagues, using the privilege of the organizer, proposed an interesting agenda for the big COSAC in November, avoiding totally the tough issue of MFF. That means for us a more skeptical view about the possibility of having an agreement or more freedom to express this view. My question, if you are so kind to develop, Minister, if possible, an agreement, what would Austria support and what would definitely reject from the current MFF proposal? If not possible, an agreement, which is your main reason for rejecting it? And finally, allow me to wish Austrian presidency success in strengthening our unity and achieving all our common goals. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Als nächster zu Wort gemeldet ist
Gunter Kriechbaum from Germany is the next speaker. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. We too would like to thank you for a great start into the Austrian presidency. We really enjoyed the event last night. My thanks go to Austria as well for allowing more time for political discussions, for providing a framework for dialogue amongst us. And I'd like to use the occasion to come back to a statement made by our Polish colleague who said more Bratislava and less of Brussels. I think within COSAC, we should talk about our perception of the European Union. We are voluntarily ceding competences to the European Union, to Brussels, because we think that together we can find better solutions than alone. And one example is trade policy. Trade policy, given the behavior of the US President Donald Trump, is in a difficult situation, and it's much easier for Russia, for example, to negotiate with 28 individual member states rather than with one strong European Union. Therefore, I appeal to you to understand why we want to solve problems together in Brussels, and I'm doing so because the elections to the European Parliament are coming up. If we all felt we could fight it out alone, well, we won't succeed. And I'd also like to congratulate Austria for having put the issue of Bosnia-Herzegovina, a country which is not represented here today, on the agenda. And I think our Croatian colleagues will endorse that, because we have to do no more as regards the future of that country. We need a second Dayton, Dayton II. At the same time, however, the European Union has to focus more again on the rule of law. I hear that President Johannes dismissed the head of the anti-corruption agency after what I would call a tainted ruling of the Constitutional Court. He had no other choice, otherwise he would have faced impeachment proceedings. But I think we have to pay great attention when those who want to bring about the rule of law in the European Union are then removed from office. So we have to be more aware of what is happening in the member states. When the rule of law is being curtailed in individual member states of the European Union, we are losing a lot more. It's not just a question of the individual state. Let us not turn a blind eye to what is happening there, because it's not acceptable.
The Czech Republic.
Thank you, Chair, for the floor, and thank you, Madam State Secretary, for the introduction into the priorities of the Austrian presidency. The Czech Senate didn't have a chance so far to discuss the priorities specifically. Nevertheless, all the topics that you mentioned have been discussed previously in the Czech Senate, so I am pretty confident that when we finally have a chance to talk about it, we will support your presidency in your priorities. I would like to make a small comment based on the previous conclusions of our Senate to the migration agenda. I think strengthening the external border, strengthening Frontex is very important. We definitely support that. From the beginning of the migration crisis, we have said that one of the pieces of the mosaic of the solution should be also improving the legal avenues for entry into Europe. So I just want to stress this. And another aspect, and I understand that it doesn't have to be specifically mentioned in the priorities, or at least in their short overview, but is the continuous and maybe stronger fight against the human traffickers, because especially in Africa, this seems to be a really, really serious problem. And if we want to improve the situation of people on the move, we have to do something with that. I have two questions. One is related to Brexit and to the Irish border. It seems to me that in the negotiations about Brexit so far, everybody knew that this is a problem, that this is a very difficult problem to solve in a good way, and I'm afraid we still don't have the solution. And the time of Austrian presidency is sort of the last time when we can come up with a good, firm solution. So I'm wondering if this is something, if there are some origins of a good solution already at hand, and what do you think about this? And my second question is about the Western Balkans. The Czech Senate supports fully the idea that the security and stability of EU depends also on the security and stability in the Western Balkans, and that the perspective of joining one day maybe EU is the only or the best force to motivate reforms in that region. But many important things happened recently, like the agreement between Macedonia, Northern Macedonia, let me say, and Greece about the name, and the decision about inviting Albania and Northern Macedonia for negotiations. But what specifically can be expected to happen in this agenda during the Austrian presidency? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Lord Whitty from United Kingdom, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, I'm deputising for Lord Boswell, who has
spent many years in supporting this organisation and enhancing the role of national parliaments within the European Union. He will hope to be here for the conference at the end of your presidency, and he sends his regards. It is his regret and mine that this may be the last presidency in which the United Kingdom plays a major part, but we have a view taken by the British people now over 2 years ago, and we have now to complete the negotiations within your presidency. We've had a period when Brussels has claimed the British are being unclear, and the British have claimed that Brussels is being inflexible. That standoff cannot continue. Last night I was assuring a number of colleagues that the British government had finally got their act together and we're deciding and putting a clear position to Brussels in the agreement at Chequers last week. This morning I'm not so sure. But let us hope that the proposition that is likely to be coming from the British government, the full text of which will not be available until the end of the week, will set out and in particular deal with the issue of free trade in goods between the United Kingdom and the EU in future, a proposition which I hope will go a long way to solving also the difficult issue of the Irish border. So I think we need a little bit more clarity from the Brits and a little bit more flexibility from Brussels in order that this presidency will oversee a positive conclusion. And of course we will have at the same time to deal with the issues of human rights and citizens' rights and security, as well as these economic issues in that context. And I wish the Austrian presidency well in terms of helping the negotiators to sort that out. I would just say one word on your priorities in relation to migration. Britain, of course, shares the need to have strong borders, but I would also echo the remarks of our Dutch colleague. It is important when emphasising the need for strong borders and indeed for shared responsibility that Europe does not lose its humanity and its liberal values and its attitude to the migrants themselves and the culture they bring with them. I think if we were to lose those values, then the role and importance and respect Europe has in the world would diminish. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lord Whitty. The next speaker will be Evelina Vasileva from Bulgaria.
Thank you, dear President, dear Madam State Secretary, dear colleagues. First of all, I would like to thank the Austrian presidency for the warm welcome and for organizing this first event of the parliamentary dimension. Austria has taken over the presidency from Bulgaria, and I would like to thank our colleagues and partners from Austria for the wonderful cooperation that we have had in the implementation of the TRIO program, and to ensure you of the continuity of our cooperation. We all know that we are facing very difficult times, times that require from us actions and decisions. Migration, Brexit, climate change, terrorist threats, digital transformation, these are the challenges ahead of us. And we need to tackle them together, and Europe should stay strong, secure, and prosperous. Therefore, we support and share the importance of the priorities as outlined by the Austrian presidency, and would like to thank you for the focus you have put on these very important 3 areas. We think that the program of the Austrian presidency is really very focused and ambitious. These are the issues that are important to all Europeans, and we need to work hard to come up with decisions in favor of the citizens. I would like to specifically stress upon the priority as outlined on the stability in the neighborhood, bringing Southeastern Europe closer to the EU, and the European perspective of the Western Balkans. As you know, over the past 6 months, Bulgaria has set this topic high on the agenda, and it was formulated as one of the top priorities in the European agenda. A lot has been achieved over the past 6 months, and I would like to thank everyone for the efforts, because this process is important not only for the 6 countries in the Western Balkan region who did a lot during the past 6 months, but also for the Balkan region, also for the whole Europe, because it means peace and stability and better future for our young people. We have seen opening of new chapters for the negotiations with Serbia and Montenegro. We have seen the recommendations and the decision to start the negotiations with Macedonia and Albania, and I would like to thank the Austrian presidency for keeping this priority, because we think that this is very, very important. And we'd like to thank the countries for the efforts that they're investing in this process, because we know it's a difficult process and they should know that we are there to support them. So I would like also to stress on the negotiations and the upcoming process of the approval of the MFF and the focus on the cohesion policy and common agricultural policy, as it has been noted. These are core policies that shape the DNA of the European Union. The solidarity principle is expressed through the cohesion policy and the common agricultural policy. So finally, I would like to thank again our partners, to wish them the best of success, and I'm certain that decisions, important decisions, will be taken during the upcoming 6 months. And I'm certain that the Austrian presidency will be effective, result-oriented, and constructive presidency for safer, more stable, and secure Europe that protects our citizens. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your kind words. Now we are listening to Soraya Rodriguez Ramos from Spain.
Merci.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers of this meeting, and I would like to congratulate Austria on its presidency. As far as Austria's priorities are concerned, let me just say that I very much support Austria's claim. Austria wants to forge closer ties with the Western Balkans. As far as Brexit negotiations go, well, I also very much support the negotiating process. Of course, mandates need to be respected. Here, we talk about citizens' rights, borders, the Irish border, and other tricky issues such as the transitional period. I do not share Austria's visions. A link has been made between security and immigration. Here I don't share Austria's views, and this concerns me. Migrants and refugees, well, they are not a threat to Europe's rule of law system and security, and I do not think that we should establish this link. Spain is prepared to make active contributions to a process of setting up a common migration and asylum policy over the past few months. My country has made active contributions, has saved many people that have tried to cross the Mediterranean. So we have saved many lives. But that, of course, is not the only solution. We need to find a common solution. After all, we face considerable challenges at European level. We need to have and find European solutions. National solutions won't do the job and are doomed to failure. There needs to be solidarity and burden sharing involving all. Here I'm talking about managing our borders. This is a joint responsibility. It's a European responsibility. And of course, it's a joint responsibility to save lives as people try to cross the Mediterranean. This is of our joint responsibility. Africa needs Europe. We shouldn't set up detention centers there. Rather, we should focus on clear-cut investment policies as well as development aid policies that make it possible for people to lead lives in dignity. I'm talking about people living in Africa. They need to lead lives in dignity. This is a task to be accomplished by all of us. We need to fight for an open, pluralistic, and diverse Europe. A Europe that wants to manage its borders by respecting human rights, the human rights of all. After all, this is what Europe is all about. This is our legacy, this rule of law system. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Next is Marc Angel from Luxembourg.
Ja, danke, Herr Vorsitzender. Ich möchte mich bei Ihnen und auch bei Ihrem Kollegen Dr. Lobotka und natürlich auch bei allen Mitarbeiterinnen und Mitarbeitern beider österreichischen.
I would like to thank the Austrian Parliament for having organized this event, this COSAC meeting here in Wien. My thanks also, of course, go to State Secretary Caroline Edstadler for her commitment to pushing the European agenda forward. We all know that Europe in the next 6 months will be managed well by Austria. Dear State Secretary, rightly, in your presentation, you said that the EU needs a healthy and resilient asylum system, but you also reminded us of the fact that a Dublin IV agreement, well, that this has not been completed. On the 2nd of July, UNHCR came up with many recommendations and transmitted them to the Austrian presidency, such as the necessity to carry out the Dublin reforms. I very much share the view expressed there. We need an equitable system of burden sharing. The Dublin reform process is a priority. Now, the Austrian Council presidency, is it willing to actually touch this hot potato issue? Is it willing to specify this agreement and push it forward? This is my first question. And then another issue that I'd like to touch on. Here I'd like to tie in with what our Portuguese colleague Margarita Marques said. Let me also point out that I very much endorse what she said. Security for our citizens. Well, what does this involve? It means jobs, social systems, social benefits. A Europe that protects is a Europe that protects against poverty as well, that protects our citizens from existential fears. So my second question is, what will the Austrian presidency do to make sure that Europe's social dimension can be strengthened and further developed as well, while supporting the EU in this undertaking? And then a third comment I'd like to make. Like many other colleagues, I very much welcome the fact that the good work carried out by Bulgaria, meaning bringing the Western Balkans closer to the European Union, that Austria actually wants to pursue these policies in the next few months. Thank you.
So we
Thank you.
3 more interventions, dear colleagues. The first one is from Jaak Madison from Estonia.
Vielen Dank. Ich möchte den Österreichern einen guten Start.
I wish the Austrian presidency all the best, and I would like to say that I look forward to this cooperation. You have singled out the right priorities. Protecting our external borders, for example, that is one of the most important priorities, the most important priority. Now, in the Schengen space, there can't be any freedom of movement if our borders are completely open, like open doors. There is a new and fresh wind blowing through Europe, and we do not want to have an unfettered culture of or welcoming culture. Thank you for the good cooperation we've had so far, and let's go on cooperating. Thank you.
Is Mairead McGuinness from the European Parliament.
Thank you, Chairs, and I join in the good wishes to the Austrian presidency, and thank you for one particular part of our discussions, which is to allow people to speak for longer, because in that we hear the different views around the table. So from the European Parliament side, let me just say that on the topics, and State Secretary outlined how you will look at this agenda of Europe that protects. And others have said this is quite a broad topic. It isn't simply about borders, but it's also about internal issues within the European Union itself. Let me then be more specific in relation to the budget, the MFF. Clearly, from a Parliament perspective, as we go to elections in 2019, it would be very helpful and important that we could speak to citizens about the European Union budget and the priorities contained therein. There is a risk that in our broadening of the areas that we wish to fund and we have outlined those in terms of migration, security, and other challenges, that we need increased funding, but the orientation at the moment is for a smaller budget, and we may have challenges in explaining to those who are in receipt of cohesion funding or agriculture funding how we are making these choices, and that is an issue that we need to discuss further. In terms of borders and security, I suppose my own background is a country where we had famine in the past and many had to leave. I'm conscious of the human dimension to this story, and I'm also conscious that many European citizens are appalled when they hear of tragedies in the Mediterranean and elsewhere. So we need to balance our focus on having secure external borders with also our international obligations, and be mindful that the European Union sets the standard globally, and therefore we should have high ambitions while also recognising that we cannot be open for everybody and that we do need a fair return policy. Let me come then to Brexit. And I'm minded to quote Lord Whitty, who said very clearly that this morning he's not so sure about the situation. And I think, given that this is my first opportunity to comment on overnight developments, I think we can only be alarmed and concerned about what has happened in the United Kingdom. I think the European Union has always been very clear, as the European Parliament has as one of the institutions, of our desire to have a fair agreement with the United Kingdom, to do it in a timely and orderly fashion. But I'm very anxious that the time frame is so short now, and perhaps we need to look at, given developments and perhaps others that may come in the next days and weeks, we need to look at our options here, because we know that Article 50 is triggered and the United Kingdom will leave at the end of March next year. But what if? We need to look at the what ifs. There is no agreement or we run out of time. And these are issues which will impact on all of our citizens. And I think that that's something we need to prepare for. Clearly, as somebody from Ireland and who represents that border region with Northern Ireland, I was very hopeful of the outcome of the Chequers conference on Friday, because I felt it was making progress on that particular issue. So we need, as I said, to prepare very well for the uncertainty which prevails around the whole Brexit issue. I suppose my last remark, and we may come to this indeed in the discussions after coffee, around the European Union, and somebody suggested it is being tested around unity. And yet we are also seeing that Europe understands collectively that we need the Western Balkans to be part of us because of the need for security there. So I was very much touched by the repeat of the comment where we export security rather than import insecurity, so that the value that the European Union has through an enlargement process that is managed well, at a time when we're seeing one of our larger members leaving, is quite complicated for our citizens to understand and to take on board. But I hope it's something that we can develop further in our deliberations. So again, I wish you well, and I thank the Bulgarian presidency for their hard work and their commitment, which I'm sure will be well matched by our Austrian colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam President. The 19th and last intervention will be from Simone Susskind from Belgium.
Merci. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Madam Secretary. I'd like to join the others who have already thanked Austria for the wonderful reception that we've experienced, and thank you also for spelling out the priorities to us. I also join the colleagues who have shown some concerns as far as migration is concerned. Now, we need to remind ourselves of the following facts. Men, women, and children die as they cross the Mediterranean. 1 out of 19 migrants loses his or her lives, whereas migration figures have actually gone down. Less than 19,000 migrants that have come to our shores, and during the previous year, it was actually 85,000. So as Europeans, we need to assume responsibility. Now, numbers, of course, are going down. They're almost as low as during pre-migration times. The European Union, therefore, needs to take a proactive approach and needs to make sure that these problems come to an end once and for all. Europe, after all, is a continent of immigration, and that's why we should also take this into account. They're not just people that are concerned about the dangers of migration, they're also people who actually place expectations in us, and they want us to show solidarity at European level as far as migrants are concerned. So these citizens, of course, need to be taken into consideration as well. And then, of course, NGOs that are sometimes delegitimized, NGOs that actually save lives. We need to delegitimize human smugglers as opposed to NGOs. And then solidarity. Solidarity, of course, with the countries of reception, Greece, Italy, and Malta, and Greece shouldn't assume all the responsibility. Now, we need to tell our citizens that we are about to solve the situation, also in election times or before elections. Let me talk about the elections and what do those elections actually mean. Well, we need to respect the rule of law systems in European countries. Here, we need to be very, very clear-cut. There are some dangers, of course. If the rule of law system is put into question, this would pose a danger. Let me just talk about what's going on in Poland and the crisis involving the Constitutional Court and the situation prevailing in other countries. Freedom of the press is curtailed, NGO rights are being curtailed. Now, this is a wake-up call, and it's our job as responsible politicians to voice our views. And with this, I would like to thank you, and I wish you all the best for your presidency. Thank you.
Dear colleagues, thank you all for your comments, your contributions, and your conclusions. I'm quite sure that we all do agree it was a smart idea to have more time for discussions. And now I have the chance to give the floor back to State Secretary Edstadler for her remarks on the debate.
Vielen herzlichen Dank.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the words of praise, and let me also pass on these words of praise to all the colleagues who have been busy involved with the Austrian presidency. I would like to thank Bulgaria very much for the wonderful job. And let me, at this point, also say the following. I took part in the concluding ceremony in Sofia. The minister in charge of EU integration said one thing to me. She said, "Sleep whenever you can, because you will miss sleep a lot during the presidency." Well, I tried to do that, but it's been quite difficult for me to actually find sleep over the past few weeks. I would like to thank you very much for having submitted constructive proposals and for also having voiced some criticism, because this is the only way we can actually achieve progress, if we have open-minded discussions and if, as has been said on numerous occasions, if we find the necessary time to engage in these discussions. Now, a lot of things have been said. I hope that I will be able to respond to most of the comments made and questions asked. Now, we are all aware of the fact that we are living in crucial times in Europe and the European Union in general. I think we should all move in one direction. We have to do this because we need to re-establish trust in EU institutions, and we need to take action together. Now, our third Council presidency takes place against a backdrop of sea change. It's quite difficult, of course, to find solutions, but as I've already pointed out, we will be an honest broker during our presidency. We will do everything we can to make progress.
Well, let me reiterate that we need your support. Permit me to try and respond to most of your questions, I hope at least. Now, I myself am a passionate advocate of the European Union. It was when the borders came down that people really felt what Europe is all about. I myself come from Salzburg, near Germany, and when the border came down, when we didn't have to cross border checkpoints anymore. It was a feeling of enormous freedom. But then things moved the other way. For 2 years, I used to commute between Salzburg and Strasbourg, and all of a sudden, border checks with their negative implications and their negative effects reappeared. So we have to do our utmost to restore the Schengen regime, but it will not be possible as long as we don't have effective external border protection. So when it comes to the question of Dublin IV, we are convinced that to start with, we need to resolve the question of external border protection. And then, when it comes to Dublin IV and other legal acts in preparation, will we be able to make progress? And let me say one thing. Security and migration are connected. Think back of what happened in 2015 with uncontrolled migration flows into Europe. We didn't know who was entering our countries, and we're still struggling with the situation created then, and which showed that Europe was not able to act. Therefore, we have to create a resilient system that makes Europe able to act even in times of crisis. As regards the Brexit negotiations, Austria will support the further development of negotiations. It's true that we are running out of time, but the Austrian Chancellor Kurz visits the United Kingdom. Actually, he was there yesterday and today, and he will go on to Ireland in an effort to make it possible to arrive at a fair withdrawal act, which allows us to remain in contact with the United Kingdom, to engage in fruitful exchanges, and to have the UK as a partner for the future. As to the statement, more Bratislava and less of Brussels. Now, I share this statement and I don't share it at the same time, because Austria is committed to the principle of subsidiarity. If this is what the statement is meant to express, I fully endorse it. We want the European Union to take a step back when it comes to minor issues that can be solved locally or at national level, but to be deeply involved in the major issues. We need a strong joint European presence, because if we don't have that in dealing with economic powers like China, Russia, or the United States, we will not be able to prevail. In the United States, I am a European. In France, I am Austrian. In Vienna, I come from Salzburg. And in accordance with this principle, the subsidiarity principle should be practiced. But altogether, we need a strong Europe that speaks with one voice. As to digitalization, there are numerous files currently being negotiated, and we're making every effort to advance them, because there is a great deal to be done in this area. We want to support further developments and evolutions, and I'm saying so clearly in my capacity as State Secretary in the Ministry of Interior. We are confronted with a rising number of cybercrime attacks, and we have to get the citizens on board, because the police alone can't do everything. It takes an analysis, and it takes efforts to protect ourselves against cybercrime. The Western Balkans, the next issue I'd like to address. Once again, I'd like to thank Bulgaria for the efforts made. We focus on this region because we want to export stability to the region, and we're fully aware of the fact that not all member states are so much in favor of the Western Balkan states coming closer to the European Union as Austria is, because we are closely related to these states and we want to spread the message among all member states. We need the member states, we need the region, and we need to protect the region against negative influences, say, from Turkey, by giving them an EU perspective. At the same time, however, we must not forget Africa. A great deal of support will be needed in the region because we have to stabilize the region. And someone said we have to be careful when using words and terms. I fully support that. We have to be careful in our wording. And at the same time, I want to say that in Austria, the European Convention on Human Rights is a constitutional law. We are committed to the respect of human rights, and we fully support the accession of the European Union to the European Convention on Human Rights. These are principles that concern the European Union itself, and we do hope to make progress in this respect. As regards the MFF, negotiations have just begun, and we'll do our utmost to move us closer to a conclusion, because we need to know where we go from here. Overall, it has to be quite clear that European added value must be created and that the funds spent have to lead to efficiency gains. All the rest remains for the negotiations to decide, but I can only tell you that it's in the interest of all of us to make progress there. The European values we want to export to the Western Balkans also have to be protected within the European Union. I'm talking about human rights and the rule of law. It's not a matter of course. We shouldn't be taken for granted to have these values, and incidents in the recent past have shown that we have to do our utmost to uphold, maintain, and strengthen these values. Democracy is a delicate thing, and we have to deal with it carefully in the European context. Overall, Austria wants to be a bridge builder between West and East, between North and South, an honest broker in difficult negotiations. We will have to do without sleep occasionally in the coming 6 months in order to move Europe forward, but we need your support. We need the support of the national parliaments in your member states. I'm looking forward to intensive exchanges also with the Austrian National Council and the Federal Council, because this is the only way for us to strengthen the parliamentary dimension. Austria's responsibility and the expectations placed in Austria are increasing day for day, but I can assure you that we're going to do our utmost, and we rely on your support in all these areas, because we want to find solutions. We want to strengthen the population's confidence in Europe, and in so doing, achieve a high voter turnout at the elections to the European Parliament. We want people to say, yes, we are proud of the European Union. Yes, we feel as Europeans. So with this in mind, I thank you for your support.
Thank you very much, State Secretary, also for your commitment that Austria will be an honest broker in the coming months within the procedures of the Austrian presidency. Thank you all for this interesting debate. I will now close this session.